I am so honored to have you, Lisa, on Bipolar Qurious. It's really my love letter, not only to myself, but the greater community of people who suffer from bipolar. And I wanted to create Bipolar Qurious for people like you who love a person that has bipolar, who work with people who have bipolar, really just a landing page for anyone that's curious about what happens during bipolar. And my mission is really to demystify the judgment and shame around bipolar. And so a year ago, I really became passionate about it when I realized that I was stuck in a limiting belief that I would never reach brilliance again because of my diagnosis, which happened 10 years ago. And I was in a prison inside myself. And I was really, a small handful of people knew that I was diagnosed with bipolar. And I experienced some really painful friendships leaving. And then I thought, wow, I have something here that I can share with people who also suffer from this. At that point, I wasn't suffering because I've been medicated since day one. I no longer experience the hypo, the mania. I'm at homeostasis, very even keel. But there are people who don't know that that's possible. And so there's suffering everywhere. So I really wanted this to be like, hey, let me show you what's possible. And I love always tell the truth when I know it. Tell the truth when you know it. It sets us free. It's totally set me free. It's really the cornerstone of my strength. Tell myself the truth when I know it. And so when I decided I'm going to create a platform and tell the truth about my bipolar so I can become the face of change of bipolar. And I know that if one person does that, and I embody that inside, and then I do this kind of work, that's all that needs to be done. Because then maybe it will affect change in somebody else. So having you here is really just so great. And I want to explore with you what it was like when I first told you and, our relationship from 10 years ago.
Well, I have to say, I mean, when you did tell me, I was surprised, right? Because I've known you for this long. And it's something that, I mean, I've been around you. I've spoken to you, for the last over almost a decade now. It's something that surprised me because when you hear about someone having bipolar disorder, you always think about like highs and lows, and you always think maybe that's the way the person is through and through all the time, right? But I've never seen actually any kind of like, hills or valleys. I've only seen like flat road from you. So when you told me, I was kind of like on the phone, like, what? Like what? Like I almost had to re-ask you because I thought maybe I wasn't paying attention and you were telling me about like a friend or someone else. And then when I started, asking you about it, I was like, oh my goodness. Like I had all these questions because I was, first shocked because I've known you so long. And then, you kind of came out to me with it and told me, which I thought was like really brave of you. The other part of me was kind of like, well, why didn't she just tell me this whole time? Like, why did she keep it from me? Why is that something I didn't know about like my good friend? Like I almost felt like maybe I didn't know her, right? Like I thought I knew her, and then I thought, oh, well, maybe she didn't trust me. I mean, I wasn't upset about it, but in a way I questioned it because I thought, well, were you not comfortable enough with me and trusting enough with me to tell me like your secret or your whatever it is you were harboring? And then I thought, oh, well, maybe she's just feeling insecure or whatever because maybe you would think that I would just run the other way if I knew that information. But how could I? Because you're my great friend, so I really don't care, right? About what, I don't care if you told me like at night you turned polka dot and green. Like I wouldn't care because you're my good friend, and I feel that, right? So if someone's your good friend, like, well, then no matter what they tell you, it's that's just something that you accept or whatnot because you love that person. So you told me, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, so anyway, what else is going on? Like,
Mm-hmm.
not a big deal.
Exactly.
And so I felt like maybe you felt, oh, like I waited this long to tell Lisa. Like I could have just told her, like right then and there, you know.
Yes.
But I also feel like maybe in life that maybe there are people out there that aren't so welcoming about it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I thought, well, okay, maybe that's why you didn't tell me. So I'm guessing.
No, this is exactly spot on. I mean, the number one thing that I noticed when I told people that were my dear friends, I could tell whether it was on the phone or in person, I could feel the vibe of them like noodling in their mind, like, oh, wait a second. The telltale signs when people are watching somebody that has a diagnosis with bipolar is grandiosity. So I've only ever lived in that space. But then once I told friends that I had this diagnosis, they were like, are you in a manic state right now? So that was devastating. But it all informed the strength that I have now. And it's really the reason why I want to open this conversation up. There are people suffering all the time on our streets. We don't even know about these people that are suffering. And I think that bipolar in general should have the same standing in the world as breast cancer awareness, as AIDS, as any cataclysmic change that affects people in mental health. You know, the idea, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and I invited her to come on and she said, well, I don't believe in mental health. I don't believe in any of these diagnoses. And that's fine. She doesn't. And then I said, do you have any experiences with any sort of mental health on your own? She said, absolutely not. In that conversation, I realized she doesn't understand what mental health is. Mental health is how do you take care of the mind, body, and spirit? And all of us have that. How do you feed yourself? What's your self-care? Do you meditate? Are you loving yourself? Are you paying attention? Are you conscious of who you are and really honoring who you are? Are you listening to this body that you've been given? So that's mental health. Then there's a mental illness aspect. The illness part is no longer in the conversation. It's all across the board mental health.
Right.
And we all have different experiences with that. So I want to, and bipolar, by the way, out of all the diagnoses, is the one that has the most shame and judgment attached to it. Like, there are songs about it. Oh, she's so bipolar. Oh my God, they're so bipolar. It's like a joke. It's a funny thing.
Right. When you were telling me about bipolar, my first instinct was, what? Because you're Hollis Wilder. You're the, 3-time Cupcake Wars champion on Food Network. So how are you, gonna tell people about this? Because, aren't you afraid about, your status, whatever? But then I said, wait a minute. This is a great platform because of who you are. And then I said, oh, I don't think I'd ever be that brave. Because that's brave. I mean, you have to think about it. You put a lot on the line. Okay, you are who you are. You're a celebrity chef. And a lot of people would hide that. Because you have to, right? You have to, have some kind of, aura or image that you have it all together. And then you don't have any problems. No matter what they are. Here you are taking yourself in a selfless way and putting yourself out there to help other people. I mean, that's incredible because not a lot of people would do that. They would be like, oh, no, not me. Can't do that, and keep it behind closed doors. So I had a lot going on, thinking to myself when I got off the phone with you. When you told me, I was like, oh my goodness. So I had all these feelings and all these thoughts, but mostly it was one, the acceptance, and then two, the kind of I had the confusion, but then all of a sudden the dust settled and I realized what you were doing and what you wanted, what your goal was, and that someone like you coming out and saying that you have a certain something, no matter what it is really probably the most brave thing you can do. Because when people come out about physical ailments, it's oh, okay, I had this, whatever, and then I had this treatment and I'm fine. Because that's how people view I think, physical ailments versus mental ailments. I feel like with mental ailments, people just feel like that's never going to go away. Although it could, right? Because, I'm in the cleaning business. I'm in the chemistry business. So I understand also not so much, human or physical chemistry, but I can also understand that it's a continuum, right? Like I said, it's dynamic. There's hills and valleys to, the human body and chemical, kind of like, neurological synapses, things like going on in the brain also that can change. So 1 minute you could be this way and 1 minute you could be another. Maybe in 5 years or 2 years or 2 months or maybe never, I don't know. Maybe you could also go back to not being bipolar. So but I think people don't realize that it's sometimes it's beyond your control, just like a physical ailment. You can't help it if you have your knee joint starts going or astray. Like you can't, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. So just like if your mind starts, well, you can't control it. Mm-hmm. So you control it with therapy, mm-hmm. right? Just different types of therapy. But this gets better sometimes, and sometimes this gets better sometimes. So it's really like dynamic. Mm-hmm. And that's how I kind of see it. So.
Yes. It's so great, everything you just said, because I can speak to the possibility of going off the medication. I thought it would be really fascinating to titrate off of my medication under the care of neuroscience and my psychiatrist, mm-hmm. and then have that documented so people could see what happens to the brain. The world is curious about it. Mm-hmm. A lot of practitioners are taking people in the direction of, oh, you don't need to take the medication. For me, I'm smart enough to know that there's no way, after having the experience that I had, being in a mental institution twice within a short period of time, I knew I was unraveling, and I also knew that I was Hollis. I knew who I was. It was really terrifying, because the idea that I wouldn't come back and I'd only stay in the psychosis, I knew that was a possibility, and it was terrifying. So when I asked my doctor, hey, can I go off the meds? He said, no, the gray matter in your brain, when you have a manic episode, it's like a tornado in your brain, and it scars and depletes the gray matter. The gray matter is the prefrontal cortex for speech, cognitive, for thought, for mood. So when that happens, the only thing that was capable of regulating me, which took 2 years to do, by the way, was to be on my medication. So I worked really hard. It was very hard for me to come back to myself, because I was like, who am I now? Who am I now? People don't often associate that there's a scar in the brain when a bipolar episode happens. You can't see it. So creating a safe place with the medicine over a 2-year period, coupled with being able to deepen my spiritual practice, eliminate white flour and sugar from my diet. All of these things feed on the level of up and down. Sugar does that, and white flour does that. So what's the diet? How am I spiritually taking care of myself? What am I doing for my body physically? And those are really hard things to do when you're grappling with your diagnosis and you're like, am I ever going to return to who I am? This is one of the reasons that people don't stay on their medication, because there's an absence. It's actually called social aphasia, where I couldn't even have a conversation in public because I was so wrapped up in trying to put together a thought, and then it would come out in sort of a mumbled way. It was very, very challenging. It was pretty terrifying.
I want to say I find it ironic, considering you're the cupcake queen. Speaking of white flour and sugar, okay, like how ironic is that? That's what you had to abstain from. Meanwhile, that's what, put you on the map. Mm-hmm. So I just find it interesting that almost like happened. It's just like something just, all of it just you had to kind of like abandon all of that in a way, because how are you going to taste your batter?
And I did drop off the face of the earth when the diagnosis happened. I was under contract. I was on Food Network for 6 years. I was in the process of developing a savory brand with a manufacturer in Europe. We had just shot a pilot for a TV show for me. I had just been on Katie Couric. Obama administration flew me to Cuba to entertain the troops. Like, I was at the height of my career. And then this happened. And everything blew up and went away. And I dropped completely out of, because my mental ability, my mental health was the forefront of my mind. I'm also a mother with 2 children. And I was going through a divorce, and everything was just a cataclysmic. It was meant to happen. Now that I look at it, you know, I really believe in what's my purpose here. Well, that was necessary and informed who I am today. So while it was going on, of course, I was resentful and I hated, and I was just like filled with rage and anger. But see how I've repurposed that, and it informs the story now that I have. And it also is not only for me, but people who are struggling with the diagnosis. Hey, you were able to do all of these amazing things before the diagnosis. The diagnosis happened. You may think you'll never return to your ability to do all the great things that you were doing. But I'm here to tell you that you will, and you won't experience the highs and lows, and the greatness that you are and what you can create and the brilliance that you have will shine through in such a way that it will blow your mind. But it takes work. It's not just about taking a pill. It's acceptance, surrounding yourself in the right environment, really seeing, how do I want to now be in the world? Who are those people that I want to carry in the world with me? What do I want to do for work? One of the things that you brought up was, you know, perhaps this is something that you won't always have to take medication for, that it's chemical imbalance and it will go away. That's not the case with bipolar, and not my experience. I'm diagnosed. We don't know where it comes from. I was diagnosed in my 40s. It happened out of a series of events, all very big events that changed my life. And then there it was. I was given a medication for anxiety, a very, very low dose. And that medication flipped me into mania. It only does that with people who are predisposed to bipolar. So there's no way that you can find out if you're predisposed to bipolar until that situation happened. So that landed me in the mental institution twice, as I was trying to navigate with my psychiatrist what medications to take. So there are people who think the way that you're thinking, in terms of, well, maybe when you're in your 60s, maybe 10 years, maybe this, maybe that, you won't have to take the medication anymore. You know, for me, also, I'm no longer identify as an alcoholic, because I now have recovery for 38 years in that same way. I know that I can't return to drinking. So I don't want to mess around with my brain, and I don't want to mess around with intellectualizing the diagnosis. I want to get on with my life, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And so I get to do that right here with you. And what we get to create together is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, because like I said before, however you're managing, or however you manage your diagnosis and your mentality, it's like you're doing it in the background, because in the foreground, I, as your friend, as your work partner, as just, all of it, I don't see or I don't feel anything different than just normalcy, really, coming from you. Like, again, when you told me, I was almost like in like a shock, because I'm like, what? Like, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was like, oh no, she's just saying she is. Like, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right. Oh, she's crazy for saying she's crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I don't, So I kind of was like, oh, but then you're like, no, really. And then you started telling me the story, and I was like, what? I was like, hold on a second. Like, how did this happen? Like, well, because I'm more like, I'm a scientific person, right? So I'm like, wait a minute. Like, so what really happened, right? Because I come from a different world, right? I come from like the physical world, and where not that I don't believe in it so much, but it's like for me, 2 + 2 is 4. There's like nothing gray about it, no gray matter about it, right? So for me, I was like trying to understand it because I never really, or maybe I know bipolar people, but I don't even know maybe that they have bipolar. Or maybe I have seen people, or I remember people maybe in my past that were like maybe a certain up or a certain down, but maybe I just thought that they were just in a mood and maybe I just disregarded it.
How often did you throw around the word crazy?
Oh, I don't know.
They're crazy. Oh, that person's crazy.
I mean, I think we all use that word loosely, and we all have, I think. It's kind of like, I don't know, like we mean it so much that they're crazy, but anyone could just be into some mood and you're like, oh, you're being crazy, whatever. But it doesn't really mean like they're really clinically crazy. They're just, but I think just when someone acts maybe in an irrational way, or they're not listening to reason or whatever, then you're like, oh, well, you're crazy. Like, oh, what do you, why are you, hello?
And that speaks completely to what you were talking about before when you say everybody with a different mental illness back in the day, they were all cobbled together like they put them in a mental institution.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just throw them in there.
Yeah, like
they're not, let's just put them all together. Yeah. Even though they have different diagnoses, and some of them might just be having a depression, and then some of them are schizophrenic, and some of them are bipolar. But you know what? We don't know what to do, so let's just put them all in this one place.
Yeah, and I think too, like we're around the same age group. So I think when we were growing up, when people had mental illness or even physical ailments, they the parents or the family, they just kind of put them away, or they left them in a room, they locked them up, and that was it. And
let's not talk about it.
Right? Don't talk about it. But there was chatter, right, in the neighborhood. Oh yeah, like their daughter, their son is there, or this or that. You grew up like that, right? And then you never really knew, like, and then maybe later on you say, oh, what was going on with so and so? Like, whatever happened with? Oh well, she had he had this. Going back to when you told me about, just to I think when people tell you that you have something, or you're suffering from something, or whatever it is, you start like to pay more attention, right? Because now sometimes the other person might say, look out for it now. Because before maybe you didn't tell me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just being with you the way I'm being with you. But now I'm sure the people, when you tell them, they're like looking for signs. Like, oh, is she manic? Is she depressed? Like, what's going on today? What's going on in an hour? Am I gonna like you're Jekyll and Hyde, right? All of a sudden this and that. So I think people also maybe, and I think I thought of that, people with bipolar, like, oh, because you always see like, movies and TV shows and things like this, so people are like, looking for it, right? So they're like, oh, are you having a manic episode today, depressed, whatever? So, and so for you, that might be a little, you're probably like on guard a lot too, because maybe when you tell someone and then they look at you, maybe sometimes you're thinking, oh, are they analyzing me? Today? Are they trying to like what's today about? Like, is she gonna? But I have to tell you, okay? Give me a hand.
Oh, my love.
You are my best friend, okay? Like forever, all right? Like, I mean, I met you and like we connected, whatnot. I don't give a crap if you tell me you woke up today with like horns and your eyes started falling out and coming back into your head. I don't care, because I know your heart. I don't really care about your mind. Because
that's so fabulous.
That doesn't do anything for me. It's what's in your heart. And that's what really led me to you, and for us to be connected as friends. Because I know a lot of people, and I've been around, and there's a lot of people who are really like, either they don't have mental illness or they're sharp in another way, but they're not that great on the inside. And they don't have good hearts. But you, my dear, you have an amazing heart, and I think you are brilliant. The things that you come up with, the things that you do. I mean, I'm always asking you when you call me and you're like, oh, Lisa, I'm doing this. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then I have to like ask, well, how you doing this? I mean, the things you come up with and their creativity is through the roof. And you inspire me. You really do, because I think you are brilliant. And it's just like one facet of of who you are. It's not the totality of self. So you're like a fine diamond. Like you have all these facets. That's just one. Okay. But you're still a polished gem in my book. And that's all I have to say about that. I love you.
I love you. Oh, priceless. This is what it's about, people, right here. This is it.
It is. It is. You are
This is it.
amazing. And you're very inspiring. We're working together, doing things. And you might say I'm crazy because of all the stuff that I've been putting you through. So I can just imagine.
Create to heal, nourish to thrive, and rise to inspire. And you just touched on all of those. That is the cornerstone, I believe, for every person. Every person has a right to find that and create it and hold it. It's not just about medication. It's about finding and adoring yourself.
So when we first were on the phone and we were talking about the collaboration we were going to do for my company and my products, at first, maybe there was a little reservation because I was like, oh, how is that going to affect me? Right? But I think a lot of people think that. If you hang out with a bipolar person, then, oh, they're going to think I'm bipolar.
Exactly.
But I'm not.
Right.
But, you know,
or
it's
is she
like,
going to try and delve into my personal stuff? I don't want my personal life out on
or that.
I don't want to talk about my personal batter, but you're right. You're spot on. The segment that we did was battered Brilliance, which is we were making cupcakes. Yeah. Your batter is this incredible company that you created in your cleaning supply. And the brilliance that came out of you being a chemist, trying all of these concoctions, is now a product that's sold all over.
Yeah.
So that's battered brilliance, right? Yeah. Your batter is what you created. And out of that, your brilliance rose. So I think it's really like so many people have brilliance. And I want to hear about the story of how they found the brilliance in themselves. Yeah. Oh my gosh, look at all these brilliant ideas and what people have created. It's the wind beneath our wings. We need that as people. Just we need more of that as people in the world. So I want to celebrate the brilliance in all the stories.
You know, again, for you to put yourself out there, you know, as a well-known entity out there in the world. I mean, people know you all over the place. You know, and now all of a sudden to come out with this, it's like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, it's like almost like a little bit of a shock, you know? So, but it works, you know, and you work very well because we just spent an entire day yesterday shooting for me. And let me tell you, you know, you had patience of a saint with me because at first I was like, uh-oh, is she gonna have a breakdown in front of me? Because I'm really working her to death. You know, but no, but again, like working with you, like I would never know because you have it under control or whatever it is that you're doing, that you have created this homeostasis for yourself. Okay. And I think that's where it lies. Like if people, I think, need to find their homeostasis, their balance, like anything else, you know, it's like a scale, right? So a little here, a little there, and then you kind of like have a little balancing act. You know, some people do that naturally. Some people they can do it with medication, right? So I guess that's what it is. But when I work with you, we're in the balance together. So, you know, I mean, there's no difference between you and I in this moment. And that's how I see it. With your friends, like how you talk about like people who maybe like betrayed you, or they when you told them they went in any other direction. I mean, of course, that's a good measurement of like friendship and who has like who's really like with you. But also, you know, maybe some people do that. Maybe they're afraid of their own selves. Maybe they see a little bit of themselves and like, oh, I don't, you know what I mean? Who knows? I mean, who knows? I mean, you don't really know what people are thinking. It could be not even about you. It could just be about themselves. It's like, you know, I feel like it's like sexuality sometimes. Like people are so afraid of people who are other than what they are. And like, and I'm not saying it's all the time the case. But I feel like sometimes if people have they're really uncomfortable or have a problem with it, I feel like maybe it's just something within themselves because why do they care so much about what someone else's mentality, sexuality, or whatever is, right? So like, I feel like sometimes it's just it's a fear-based, but it really is like they internalize it. I don't know. I think maybe.
Yes.
Could be. Possibly. You know, with how you manage your, you know, bipolarism, you know, with your medication, you you're in the balance, right? Because it creates like a homeostasis for you, or a balance, where like for me, naturally, I suppose, like my balance is just, like a natural occurrence. But maybe for your balance, you just need a little bit of like an aid to assist in creating that balance or creating that homeostasis. So it's not like really a big deal, it's just kind of like almost like insulin, right? It's like you have to like balance your sugar levels or your insulin levels or whatever. So I think it's kind of like a parallel, but it's just for your mind instead of, the rest of your body.
And it's complicated up there.
Yeah.
You've got all sorts of things firing. You've got neurons. You're the chemist, and your company that you created, I mean, is just remarkable. Really. Not that it's remarkable for you because you already had that mindset, but you launched a brand that is, what is it, sold all over the world?
No, and international.
It's
now.
international.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that took some real scrubbing. Literally, some real scrubbing.
Yeah, literally.
And you created a flawless shine with very simple ingredients that is selling like hotcakes.
Yeah.
And that is no small feat.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how hard it is to sell hotcakes now, don't you?
I know how hard it is to sell hotcakes.
Yeah.
I did that with my cupcake companies.
I know.
You got to sell a lot of hotcakes.
A lot of hotcakes.
In order to make some money.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm grateful that period of my life is over, but also that together this collab that we did is like reigniting the creativity that I had. So it's like rise to inspire, right? And so we got to do that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did it feel to get back into the kitchen after all these years?
It was the best parts of all of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't making thousands of cupcakes.
Well, I kind of felt like Hollis got her groove back.
I did.
I really felt like that.
I really did.
Yeah, I was watching you. I'm just over the moon, to know you and to, be in your presence, in your company. And not a lot of people know this about Hollis Wilder, but she's damn good fun. You can just hang with the best of them, and the things that you say and you do, and you're so down to earth. And this is another reason why I think that I was able to also ask you so outwardly about what was going on with you, because I think you and I also have a chemistry together where we're such good friends that is no holds bar, right? You call me and tell me everything. I call you and tell you everything. It's all out there. And I'm not afraid to ask you, and you're not afraid to ask me. And I think that's how it should be with people like you that, come to find, you have bipolarism, that people should just ask. These people are afraid. And mostly I think they're scared that they're going to offend you or offend people that have it,
So they step away and they don't invite you and they don't engage. And they're terrified that what happens if we invite her to a party and she goes crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how is that going to look for me?
Yeah. Or the courage, right?
Right.
The courage for you to come out as bipolar, but also the courage for other people to ask about it. Because sometimes you say it and then other people internalize it, but then that's it. They shut down. But they're afraid to ask because they're like, oh, am I going to set her up into some manic mode now? Or she's going to get depressed because I ask, and now she's going to think I'm maybe a certain way, or she's not going to like me anymore because maybe I'm. And also sometimes people could say the wrong thing to you because maybe they're learning and they don't understand it.
Well, that's what Bipolar Qurious is all about.
Yeah.
There is no wrong question.
Right.
They can say whatever they want.
Right.
This is like a platform where I want to answer questions and help eliminate the judgment and stigma. The societal judgment and stigma is real, and it exists everywhere.
Right.
So just let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Let's educate.
We can still, we can still come together. We can still create. We can still thrive. It doesn't matter that you're one way or I'm another or vice versa or whatever, right? So, just like you're an artist and like maybe I'm a scientist, and so we have a perfect tornado together. So it's kind of like the same thing with the mentality, right? So, and there's things that you think about in a different way that I think about in a different way, but when it comes together, we make greatness.
And that's exactly what Battered Brilliance is all about.
Yeah.
I created Battered Brilliance as a way to honor everybody's story, to help them find their own brilliance and to celebrate that. It's really about your ability and being able to create something beautiful from that. and also to speak to it in a way that you trust and honor what it is, and that it will resonate. And then how are we nourishing ourselves? I mean, it's like, it's a whole myriad of ways that we nourish. What are you reading? What are you listening to? Is it positive? Is it negative? How are you feeding your body? Are you thinking that you're terrible and you made terrible decisions? Or are you excited because you get another opportunity to, wow, this is brand new. I get an opportunity to have a new experience every day and rise to inspire. You know, this is about being of service. How can I best be of service? What should I say? Where should I go? Whom should I speak to? I feel the most empowered when I'm of service. And the way that I know how to do that is by telling the truth through Battered Brilliance and Bipolar Qurious, to inform so that we can have a conversation that will eliminate the divide. Thank you so much for being here with me. It means so much. You mean so much to me.
You mean so much to me, and I love you.
I love you too.
You are one courageous woman.
And you are one brilliant lady.
And that's why we're friends.
And that's why.
That's why.
Silly goose.
Silly goose.
You silly goose.
You silly goose. You silly goose.
You silly goose. Aw.